In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, the episode is all about Colorado freshman Cody Williams. Leif has Cody rising up his draft board, so stay tuned to find out why Leif believes Cody Williams could end up as a top 3 pick in the 2024 NBA draft. Shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. And my co-host for today is Leif Thulin, the guy that watches more college basketball than anyone else. And he was at a college basketball game last night, a thriller. And we'll hear Leif's thoughts on that in a second. But if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment, click the bell so you can get notifications every time we drop, because we are dropping a podcast or a video, if you're watching on YouTube, 5 days a week. All right, first, before we get into Cody Williams, I want to hear your thoughts on the Utah-Arizona game last night. It was a thriller, a high-scoring game. What were your initial thoughts from that game as a, I guess, from the fan perspective and also as a draft evaluator?
Well, my main thought was it was very competitive, but I wouldn't say well played. I think there was very clear signs of, oh, this is college basketball where you grow within a game, and you also have those frustrating spurts where, oh my goodness, like how are they not breaking this zone, which is a very rudimentary zone, and that's supposed to be a 1 seed or a 2 seed. That kept crossing my head about Arizona. And then I was impressed with just the resilience of Utah. It went triple overtime, for those of you who don't know. Very close game. Arizona pulled it out, winning by 6 in triple overtime. And it was fun to go to. It was from being from Utah, the Huntsman Center hasn't been super electric since before I was born, with Michael Doliak and Andre Miller and some of those guys. So the history, knowing the history, that made that game more fun because it was loud and it was a good environment. As from the draft perspective, no one really wowed me. I would say I'm more intrigued than I already was with KJ Lewis, is someone we briefly have spoken about. And I've been intrigued by Pelle Larsson for some times, and he was kind of Jekyll and Hyde in this game. Yes, he had a really good game from counting stats, but you tend to do that when you're playing in triple overtime. And he had some bright spots, but also defensively, I think there were some lapses. But it was a fun game, and I intend on covering some more of them. I got credentialed to go, and I'm planning to do that more frequently.
Okay. All right, let's get into Cody Williams, who went to high school in Arizona, but passed up going to play for the Wildcats and surprised a lot of people by going to Colorado. And you had him at number 5 on your big board that released about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. But now you think he deserves to be ranked higher. What has changed for you on Cody Williams?
Yeah, he was one I always had a feeling would rise. And I think when I made my list, I said there's a pretty good chance one of these guys elevates in my top 5. And I didn't quite specify, but that's who I was leaning towards. I watched a ton of Cody Williams the past week, and I already liked him, having him top 5. But what struck out to me is just the ease with which he's able to create, and he's thin and slender. And if he's able to put some muscle mass on, and part of the reason I believe that he'll be able to do that is I just watched Jalen Williams from up close working for the Jazz. I saw him, and I was like, man, if Cody's 18 and he's going to be a pro at 19, and Jalen Williams came in at 21, now he's 23, and Cody's bigger, earlier in his development, was more touted. And I'm not saying that's a perfect comparison whatsoever. They're not the same, but there's just genetic things that you can't teach necessarily. And he's got a gift with the ball in his hands. He gets to where he wants, even being super slender. And I mean, the knock coming into this year was his shot's not perfect. Well, he's shooting 48% from 3. He's shooting good numbers from the free throw line, good numbers from the field. And I just buy that jumbo creator. That's always an archetype I buy. And I think the NBA needs more and more of them. And he's got more ability to rise as a player than some of the players that are in the same echelon.
His range is pretty wide, at least from people that I've talked to, not around the league, just from other draft evaluators. I know Kristen Peak had him at number one. Richard Statement had him at number 10. You had him at number five. I forgot where I have him in my top 10. I watched a lot of his film again yesterday. This is probably like my third round watching film. And I get it. He's still a reluctant shooter. Like he's shooting very good from three. Like if you would have told me coming into the season that he was going to shoot 40% from three, I would have been like, he addressed my biggest concern. The volume isn't great, but he's making the shots. He's making the shots that he's taking. Any concerns about his finishing in traffic? Like it's weird. Like there are times when he has a runway where he makes some like athletic plays above the rim, like he'll finish with dunks. But then there's times where if he's driving to his right, he gets bumped and it turns into like a flailing layup. Do you have any concerns about his ability to finish in traffic?
A little bit. I would say he's reliant on spin moves to kind of create into like finesse finishes and uses his length rather than athleticism or strength. I do think that some of what you brought up about when he flails into layups, I think some of that's just he's so thin at this point that once his body matures, I think he's got a wide enough array of moves to go into people's bodies and score. And I believe in the coordination to finish because he's finishing harder shots already. But I do think he is, for lack of a better word, a finesse finisher at this point. He's not a take it at your body type of finisher. And that's typically not the way I think. And then in terms of like functional athleticism, I do think he needs that runway more than maybe his brother, which obviously he's 4 years older. But you watched him in the NBA, and he just elevates from the as soon as you snap your fingers, he gets into the paint off 1 foot, 2 feet, and rises. Cody Williams kind of soars and uses that long arm, long wingspan, gets to the rim and slams home dunks, but he needs a full 2 long strides to go up there. So I don't think he's quite the electric athlete that Jalen Williams is, but I do believe that he's got the finesse and coordination that is pretty much unteachable at his size. And I believe in athleticism growing into the body. And I've heard Jalen Williams say he was a bit of a slower grower as well. And maybe that's the case, maybe it's not, but he's got a skill set that's already admirable. And if he grows into his body, maybe gains some athleticism functionally, that's the type of guy I would bank on to make a high potential pick in a draft that's been deemed weak.
Yeah, we are talking about Cody Williams, 6'8", 190-pound freshman at Colorado. He's averaging 14.4 points, 3.6 rebounds, 2 assists. He's shooting 57% from the floor and 48% from three. So he is a guy that is definitely helping himself. Like I said earlier, his range is pretty wide, at least from people that cover the draft. I mean, I've seen him as high as 1 to 10. I do think he has put himself in a position to possibly be the first college player taken off the board. In your opinion, what college player could surpass him as the first NCAA player off the board?
I don't think anyone will. If I were forced to choose, maybe someone could fall in love with maybe Jacoby Walter if someone were to fall in love with shooting. But the more I watch him, the less I like him.
Yes.
And that's my personal take. So I don't want to say like he's not good or anything, but I don't think it'll be him. Castle's moving up, but I don't think he's quite got the allure of Cody Williams, and I don't think either Dillingham or Shepard are going to sway people to take him in the top five. And I think Cody Williams pretty safely with upside is going to be a top five pick. Like, and I think that's what will happen. And for me, I think right now I've either got him one or two, honestly.
Do you think Isaiah Collier could creep back up in that range?
I think he's just got too much of a past that was bad in the small sample size to erase, because that's what's going to stick out because USC's been bad. So he'd need some sort of like miracle run where they win the Pac-12 tournament and get into madness, and he's like, it looks like an All-American freshman. I don't foresee that happening. And then Dillingham's been excellent recently. I just don't think his archetype's one that the NBA scouts are going to love enough to take in the top five. So I really do think he's pretty much head and shoulders in his own category in terms of the collegiate players at the top of this draft.
Yeah, Walter sliding for me. If I'm not mistaken, it was like 30-24 shooting splits in the Big 12. And so I feel like if Walter's early season start could still keep him in the top 10, then if Collier has a strong remaining second half of the season, I think he could possibly creep up in that range to where he could end up being the first college player taken. But as of today, I think it would definitely be Cody Williams. All right. When we return, we're going to talk about Cody Williams' strengths and maybe some areas of concern. But let's talk about eBay Motors. And our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. So whether you are preparing for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. Josh gives out about 5 players that he thinks could be big winners as far as helping you win games. And Marvin Bagley is one. Bagley is Washington's likely starting center now since Daniel Gafford has been traded, and he is worth grabbing for fantasy leagues. Another guy that would be worth picking up for your fantasy team on the waiver wire is Taylor Hendricks. And you probably know better than anyone. I think the Utah Jazz made some trades and some moves to give Taylor Hendricks more of an opportunity to play. He was a top 10 pick, and I think he's going to find a larger role down the stretch for the Utah Jazz. And Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Sports is, again, helping you with your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a thing or two about building a championship team, and it's all about being the perfect fit. And it is the same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you can make sure that your car stays running smoothly, whether it's brake kits, LED lights, headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your car needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or you get your money back. And at these prices, you are burning rubber, not cash. So keep your car clean and alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now you can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. So find the Locked On Sports Today channel now on Amazon Fire TV. All right. We left off talking about Cody Williams and the likelihood that he could be the first college player selected. Let's talk about his strengths. And I know you talked about him being a jumbo creator and his size, but what is it that you like about him outside of that that you think could make him one of the top 3 picks in the 2024 NBA draft?
I think just the ease with which he handles. Like, you don't see 6'8" players so fluidly handle the basketball very frequently at the age that he's doing it. And he's a different type of 6'8" than Luka. Luka is a big bodied, strong guy who has the ball on a string. Cody Williams is more of a lengthy crossover, glide to the rim type of guy, but it's easy. The ball's on a string for him. He knows how to get to the basket. He finishes with touch. He's got and I've said this to you before, I don't love when people shoot a ton of floaters because I rely on the floater because I can't get to the rim. These guys, I really want to be able to get to the rim if they're my primary creator, but he's got great touch with either hand all the way at the rim or at the in-between stage as a mid-range jump shot or push shot floater. However you want to do it, he's got all the tricks in the bag. And his shot, which was, as we said in the first segment, something that was a concern heading into the year, isn't beautiful, and he's a slight bit reluctant, but he's shooting over 2 a game at 48% right now, and that's declining right now. Like, it was at 55 as of a few weeks ago. Yeah. And so I just think his ability to change directions and have the ball on a string, and he can pass with either hand, live ball dribble, see over the defense. I think he's got true point guard skills in a wing's body that's not fully developed, and I buy the development of his body. And if that happens, I really think there's a chance you're getting someone who could be an all-star in the NBA.
I agree. So coming into this season, I had some notes on him, and I just read my notes, my scouting notes. I put he has good positional size at 6'8". He's skilled, he's coordinated, smooth and fluid. Thought he had good vertical pop, is a versatile offensive weapon, creative ball handler, has some offensive creativity, good touch around the rim. He can attack the rim off the dribble with his long strides, point forward, upside, and potential, good passing instincts, makes the right play, passes the ball ahead in transition. And in high school, he was an efficient finisher at the rim, which I mean, I think all of that has translated to college. I mean, he's shooting like 58% from the floor, something like that. So he's been efficient all over. My concerns coming into the season where I thought he really lacked physicality, was likes to shy away from contact, was a reluctant shooter from three, shooting off the catch, and I just thought that he often went up weak instead of going up strong. He's addressed at least two of those to me, as far as the shooting off the catch. And I don't know if I want to use the word reluctant shooter now, even though I probably did in the opening. He's just not putting up a high volume, but he's been efficient. He's been a much, much better shooter than I expected. And as far as like going up weak, and I mentioned like there are times where I think he kind of flails. I still think he avoids contact sometimes, but I've seen enough plays where he goes up strong and he looks to dunk on guys, but it's when he has a runway. So I feel like he's addressed a couple of the concerns I had coming into this season. Now, for you, what are your areas of concern for Cody Williams?
Well, I think strength is the easiest one, but I think that's the easiest for him to prevent. To alleviate as a concern and make it something that he's good at. Like he's all together a big wing with ball handling skills once he puts on strength. The next one would be, I think that when he goes to the rim and it's not straight down the middle, he tends to lean to a side, and he's going to get to that side and or spin and then just shoot right off the pivot. I think I wouldn't say it's quite premeditated because he does have good feel, but you do notice that his drives are a drive to shoot a leaning layup or kind of a push shot off of a pivot. And I think there's a lack of like, the Villanova jump stop where you become unpredictable. But that's pretty nitpicky. And that's why I believe in him so much, is because I think that the biggest issue is that causes that issue is strength. And I believe in him to get better at that. And then I think the shot, I was just looking at some numbers while you were talking there and about hesitancy or reluctance. He's shooting 48% on threes, and he's shooting 48% on spot ups, and he shoots some of them off the dribble as well. And he's not great at it, but the fact that he's willing to do that in a time in college where he's got two other players on his team that are upperclassmen that are in NBA mock drafts. I wouldn't say I agree with how high they're placed in a lot of them, but Tristan Da Silva and KJ Simpson are talented players that are upperclassmen. The fact that when they need a bucket, they turn to him, I think inspires confidence for me.
All right. When we return, I want to hear your thoughts on teams that you believe could be a good fit, and if you have a player comparison that is not his brother. Stay tuned. All right, before we get into the last segment, let's talk about Nissan, because I want to know, are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? You ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. And the lineup includes the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder. It has room for up to 8. It has an expansive cargo capacity, an advanced available 4x4 capability. It has 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds in towing. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is there to answer. So go check out the Nissan Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. All right, I'm going to put you on the hot seat a little bit here. What team or teams do you think would be a good fit for Cody Williams?
Honestly, I'd say most of them. that are picking at the top. I don't think you're looking at him as like, hey, this is the savior of my franchise necessarily. So like a lot of people will have to temper expectations because when you're picking one, that's often the case. I would say the Wizards would certainly come to mind as someone who at the near the top need a ball handler, someone that can create for others and make good things happen. I think he and Bilal Coulibaly could be a fascinating wing tandem. The Spurs near the top, I think if he played pick and roll, and I didn't really mention this as much just because Colorado doesn't run that much pick and roll because they have a good ball, like a good passer and Eddie Lampkin who gets the ball to the high post. I think he's an excellent pick and roll player. Whenever he comes off the pick and roll, he makes good reads and he gets to the rim pretty well. So I think he could be excellent in pick and roll, pick and pop with the Spurs, and the Spurs are playing Jeremy Suhan as the point guard at times, sometimes Devin Vassell, and obviously they have Trey Jones, but none of those guys are the future at that position. I think he could be. And then selfishly, I would love the Jazz to find a way up in the lottery and find a way to draft this guy. And I'd consider, the Jazz just got 28 and 32 or somewhere thereabouts with the Raptors first rounder and the second rounder between some teams picking at the top of the second. If you could package a deal and move up slightly, assuming the lottery doesn't break exactly your way, he'd be someone I'd be really fascinated to see him pair with Keontae George and some of the younger players on the core of the Jazz. And I really think he fits just about any team in varying capacities. But the first two I mentioned would probably be my favorites for Cody Williams.
Does he fit the Pistons?
I don't think so with Cade being there already. I wouldn't be mad if they were to be there and he's there. I would probably take Sar if I'm the Pistons. But if Sar's gone and the Pistons are picking, I wouldn't be mad about that pick. I just don't think he's as natural of a fit if I'm hand selecting fits. But I really like him. I mean, like I said, I think he's got more all-star potential, and I don't think he's even fully developed. Where a lot of these guys, like Sar, is thin, but you can see he's kind of got a man's body. I think Cody Williams is the most physical room to grow, and he's already got a very high skill level and productivity as one of the top options on the team that probably makes the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think the Pistons would be a pretty nasty fit considering they already have, I think, 3 guys that are best with the ball in their hands.
Yep.
And I think they need like a complementary player that's more so I think Zachary Reese-Shea will probably be best in Detroit because he doesn't necessarily need the ball. He can space the floor. But Williams, I think that would be like a weird fit. Charlotte, that could be interesting. I mean, that would definitely be a long backcourt with LaMelo and Cody and Brandon Miller. That could be really interesting there as you have 3 guys that are long. I wouldn't say they're like elite level athletes, but they're good athletes, but they can all do different things with the ball. Portland, I don't know how that would necessarily work considering. I mean, I'll assume Brogdon gets moved in the offseason, but with Scoot, Shaden Sharp, Ant Simons, I think that would be weird fit. Memphis is going to be in that range. I mean, I just think the best fit for him would be Washington and Charlotte. Those would probably be the fits that I like the best. San Antonio could have 2 lottery picks with the direction that Toronto's going in. Houston, not a fan of that fit. Atlanta, I don't know. I mean, I don't think he falls this far, but as of today, just based off the records, the Thunder would be in the top 10, and that would be pretty interesting there to have 2 Jalen Williams on the team, and one of the Jalen Williams has his brother Cody on the team. All right. Do you have a player comparison? Do you think there's anyone that his game is similar to?
I think obviously the easy one that everyone's going to say is his brother. I don't think they're the same. I think Jalen relies on his physicality a lot. Cody's more guile. Um, I searched around during the break and I found one that intrigued me in the idea of Jalen Rose. I didn't see a ton of Jalen Rose because most of his career predates me. But
Wait, what year are you born?
2000.
Sheesh. So that
Not
means you were like born when Jalen Rose was what?
when he was in his like fifth year, fourth or
Yeah.
fifth year. I've seen enough basketball. I'm a bit of a student of the game, a historian of it, and I've watched him play at the NBA, watched him at Fab Five, in both documentary and full games, and I can see the rationale behind it. But I just wanted to preface that's not what I would just immediately come to.
But I like it.
And
I like it.
I think
That
it's
might be the
smart
best
because look, he's not like an amazing shooter. Jalen Rose wasn't an amazing shooter. He was a good athlete, unspectacular though, and he's got a good feel for the game, creates for others, uses his length to be a good creator for himself and others, and someone who can be disruptive defensively. So I actually like that. And the other one I saw was T Mac, and I just think that's overly like that's hyperbolic because T Mac was an explosive athlete and had just unbelievable game in the post and just a scoring knack that I think he's one of the most underappreciated players ever. But I think they're just basing that off of their builds.
Well, that's because he never won a playoff series until he was at the very end of his career in San Antonio. And then, when people say, well, he never had any help. I'm like, well, T-Mac had enough help where he went up like 2-1 or 2-0 multiple times. But that's a whole different story. But I'm going to steal. I'm not big on stealing, but I'm going to steal that Jalen Rose comparison because Jalen was a guy that could score, but he was a natural facilitator also. I think that, well, he played point at Michigan, but when he got to the NBA, I think Denver tried him playing the point a little bit earlier in his career, but he really, in my opinion, had his best years with the Pacers when they went to the finals. But he was a guy that could score. He could score. I mean, the game is totally different now as far as like the pace and all that, but Rose averaged about 14 and 3.5 rebounds and a little under 4 assists for his career. His best season on paper were with the Pacers. He actually had a 23 point per game season in Chicago, but I could actually see Cody Williams having some similarities to peak Jalen Rose. 18 to 22 points per game, about 5 rebounds, 6 assists. But looking at those numbers, I'm trying to think, what would Jalen put up with today's pace? Because if he were averaging 25 and 6 in the year 2000 when you were born, and those were some gritty Pacers teams, he could easily be a triple-double threat with increased pace. So I like that. I'm going to use that, but I will be sure to give you credit that whenever I compare Cody Williams to Jalen Rose, I will give you the credit. So that's a good one. Anybody else come to mind?
I think there's plenty of players that haven't had the success that were wiry and good at handling the ball. But it's harder to compare. Like if you were to go back a little bit and just someone I was actually randomly stumbled into researching basketball recently is like Marquise Daniels. Like if he's a low end of like what I think Cody Williams could be, that's something he could have, that very low end. And I'm not meaning to be disrespectful of his career, but he's like a lengthy distributor whose high season was about 13 points per game, and he was a winning player on teams as a wing. And I think he could easily be that, but I think he's closer to the Jalen Rose than he is Marquise Daniels. I just think it's the build and the nature of how they score is similar.
Well, Marquise had a phenomenal, I think it was his rookie year when Don Nelson tried him at the point guard for the last 15 games or something like that. And he put up some really, really good numbers. And then I think once the coaching changed from Don Nelson to Avery Johnson, his role was a little bit more consistent throughout the rest of his career. But those games that he played the point guard for the Mavericks at the end of his rookie year, he was putting up triple doubles. And shout out to Don Nelson, who was like a pioneer as far as thinking outside the box and being creative. But I like those comparisons. Well, that wraps up this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast. We dedicated this entire episode to Colorado's Cody Williams. Share your thoughts on Cody Williams. You can find us on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, obviously, you can comment on YouTube. But if you are listening on the audio version on the podcast, you can send a message on Twitter. My Twitter account is Barlowe, BARLOWE 500. And then Leif's is Leif Thulin, LEIF THULIN. And if you can remember that, you can send us a message and share your thoughts. But I'm really digging the Jalen Rose comparison. But once again, it's Rafael Barlowe, Leif Thulin, and we are out.